before Representative Flowers make a motion, I want to just say that House Bill 5417 is an attempt to create the Isolation Confinement Restriction Act, and that's what this bill is about. Representative Flowers moves that House Bill 54. Okay, Representative Cassidy in the chair, and
What's the bill number?
5417.
There's no amendment.
Amendment, yes. As amended, right.
Representative?
It was adopted.
In the other day.
Right.
Representative Flowers moves House Bill 5417 as amended to pass, and I'm assuming because you're holding your code that you want to open the roll and vote yes?
It's being reported as voting aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Harris votes aye.
Harris votes aye. Mayfield votes aye. Representative Ford, would you like to, hang on.
Just a question of the chair. Is this the only business we're doing today?
Yes.
All right, and may I inquire of the sponsor how it is that the bill got here?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm just curious, given the procedural aspects, wasn't this in crim or no?
It was.
Okay, so help me out. I'm a Republican. I don't know how you guys do your thing behind the scenes. How is it that this bill switched committees?
It was not placed in the right committee in the first place.
Then why did we have a hearing? Why didn't you move it to the right committee in the first place? With all due respect.
Because I don't move bills out of committees.
But you moved them into the right committee. I'm just curious because
I just fight for the bills to be in the right committee, and I finally got the fight on our side.
No, she's not.
all right, because I hear you, but restorative justice is a wonderful term. I'm just not sure this bill wasn't in the right committee, which is maybe why it went where it went. We had that procedure, now we are where we are. It just, again, I don't get all the inside stuff you guys get to do, being the majority, but it's a curious procedure. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Did you want to continue, Representative Ford?
Oh, yes, I'd like to
I
present
would
the
have moved
bill.
stuff out of different committees
You want to do it too?
for a whole bunch of bills.
So I'd like to present the bill as amended. So House Bill 5417, Madam Chair, as amended with House Amendment number 1 is a government placement amendment that creates the Isolation Confinement Restriction Act. And it does a few things. But if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, I just have a question of IDOT. I know they're here. And is it okay if they answer a question or two before I start?
Is IDOC prepared to respond to the sponsor's question?
I guess I'll sit here.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure, he hasn't asked it yet. I'm asking if you're prepared to
Yes, we're
respond.
prepared
Yes,
to testify.
okay.
I would like to ask a few questions of IDOT. If you could step to the mic, that'd be great. Go.
Well, I have I'm Michael Lane, Department of Corrections. I will fill out a slip. We have people here ready to testify, but I just wanted to point out to the committee before we got started that, you know, the bill was in crim the other day, and with the agreement to continue to work on it, and I believe that we had a meeting immediately after committee to continue to work on the bill. So I was also surprised to see that it ended up in this committee today, because I thought we were going to be meeting on this for the next several weeks. But with that said, I do have experts here ready to testify today.
So let's speak to working on it. That's
Sure.
what we're doing now, working on it. And after we finish working on it today, I hope that we can offer some compromise to move forward on this issue. Is that acceptable in your?
I believe that I had said in your office last week when we met after committee that we are concerned about rushing a bill as far as, you know, getting it out there this week. But yes, you have our word that we will continue to sit down with.
Is the director here?
The director is not here today.
Okay. I'll ask my question. Can you tell me, tell us the rules of solitary confinement as
Sure.
it is today? What type of rules are we, yeah.
Sure, I'm going to introduce our director. We're going to have our director of operations for the department and our policy advisor for the department.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Mike Atchison, Chief of Operations.
So the question is, could you tell us the rules of solitary confinement today? Which the question is, how do you determine who, when, and why people are placed in solitary confinement in Illinois, or administrative detention, or however you want to call it?
It can be as short or as long as you like it to be. It's about a 50 or 60 page rule called Department Rule 504 that governs disciplinary procedures, gives due process, disciplinary segregation being one of the possible penalties. It also governs grievance processes. So to answer your question directly, there are a series of offenses, charges that an offender can be charged with, whether it be, they're ranged from 400 series minor infractions to serious violent assaults, which is a 100 series infraction. There are...
These are internal codes for
Yes.
offenses committed within the facility?
Correct. You can liken them to, you know, a criminal charge. Albeit, these are administrative charges. They're not criminal. They can turn into a criminal charge if they do meet that threshold. When an offender does something that appears to violate one of these charges, whether it is assaulting an officer or destroying a cell or lighting a fire or simply not having an ID card, which is a very minor one, staff are trained to know what the corresponding charge that applies. They write a ticket, which you can, again, liken to, say, a traffic ticket.
So you do have rules?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, very detailed rules.
Okay, have you read the bill that's before us today?
I have.
What don't you like about it?
There are aspects, quite a few aspects of the bill that seriously diminish the department's ability to separate the most violent offenders from the general population. And I stress the word separate. Solitary, isolation, neither of those words exist in any of our policies. Probably haven't for 100 years.
So could you be more specific about what you don't like about the proposal?
The limitation on the number of days that we can separate an offender from general population, limiting to 5 in 150 days, is even in comparing to other states, their maximum range from 90 to 360 days. And I'm only talking about the most serious offenses here. We have a very small portion of our population that is also the most violent portion of our population. We have an obligation to protect other offenders, let them rehabilitate, let them do their time, so to speak, and the staff that work there.
So do you think that your system deserves improvement?
Yes, sir.
How long will it take you to improve it?
As a matter of fact, we are on the verge of submitting sweeping changes to the departmental rule that governs the disciplinary process through to JCAR, which dramatically drops the maximum segregation penalties for almost all of the charges. As a matter of fact, if I can be so far to say that all of the 300 series and 400 series charges have gone from, some of them had about 3 months maximum seg, they're going to 0.
I'm glad you said JCAR because we did have a hearing in judiciary, and one of the members in JCAR, a member of JCAR, said that they probably would rather see a bill and a law passed to help you administer your new rules. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know the person that said that. I've never heard.
I don't think that's accurate.
Our rules are driven directly from statute, the Code of Corrections, and that being a derivative of the Code of Corrections, we stay in line with what we are obligated to do, and we, through that JCAR process for the last year, making changes in the whole process, we are improving it dramatically. So legislation, to answer your question, sir, is, I don't know that it would make it, I think, a little bit more convoluted, because you have a lot of mixing and matching to do.
Representative Sanda had a follow-up on
Just
that.
a clarification, Representative. I was in the same committee.
Hang on, Carver, you're voting yes? I vote yes. Okay.
Just to clarify, I was in the same meeting, I'm on JCAR with Representative Tepetti, and I think he was a little less clear than you suggested. And I'm happy to talk with him at any time. He and I both take our responsibilities on JCAR very seriously. Whenever a department or agency comes to us with a new set of rules or changing rules, we take that responsibility seriously. We do not usually get legislation with new rules. Occasionally it occurs, but rules and how departments interact and engage, and including the Department of Corrections, if they're making changes, that process ought to go.
If you review the notes, you'll see that the representative stated that it would make sense to have some policy coming from the chamber.
Well, I didn't say, he didn't say some policy, but a whole new bill, or changing the
Well, we're
rules.
arguing about something that we shouldn't argue. I simply said that I believe that the
I'm not arguing, I'm just
representative
making sure the record's clear.
It's
on that.
clear
Okay.
that the representative said that he believes that it would be in order to have some type of bill passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate to be given to work with JCAR. That's what was said. I know that may not be verbatim, but that's to the nature of his comment.
Are there other questions for the witness?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me ask you a few more questions. What are the number of prisoners in disciplinary segregation, administrative detention, and investigation segregation by prison and by race?
I don't have the breakdown by demographics in front of me, but I can tell you that our total confinement, which includes all those subcategories you mentioned, is at 1978, 1,978. That's down almost 30% from a little over a year ago.
And so are you saying that the Department of Corrections does not need the help of this body to improve solitary confinement? That's what you're saying?
I pride ourselves in our ability to recognize when change needs to be made, and we have made those changes over the past year and are getting ready to push them out to JCAR, and I think they will make a dramatic effect. So,
What's your number one pride and change that you've made in the Department of Corrections?
reducing reliance on segregation as a corrective action.
Okay. So what are the hours per week the prisoners are out of their cell while in confinement, solitary confinement?
In segregation, or
Both.
ranging from 21 to 23 hours per week, depending on they have types of passes they have to go on, things
So
like that.
if they're in solitary confinement, they're out of that environment for 22 hours?
Oh no, I'm sorry, the inverse. They're in segregation. They get currently between 5 and 9 hours of yard a week.
Is that clumped
That's
all together?
No. It's just divided up by every day or two. They'll get an hour or two on the yard. There are reasons to come out of the cells. Recently, going from one shower a week to 3. There are passes they go on, and it's hard to really, especially from offender to offender, they may be out for mental health treatment for intervention or something like that. So, but to answer your question, 22 hours is general, probably a close approximation. Currently.
That's Alan.
Okay, so you want,
It would be
you want to hear from proponents now?
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with Alan Mills.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee,
State your name for the record.
sorry, Alan Mills, M-I-L-L-S. My name is, I'm the Executive Director of the Youngstown People's Law Center. We don't have to
I'm going to stop
guess.
you for 1 second. I need to add Representative Monique Davis to the roll. Sorry, go ahead.
We don't have to guess as to who's in segregation and why. The Department of Corrections has necessarily provided a nice chart, which is in the blue packets, which I see were not distributed, but are sitting in the back table. If you can hand those out, there's a nifty little chart, which was prepared by the Illinois Department of Corrections about 5 years ago. And those are the most current records they have, according to the FOIA that we filed. They list the 31 reasons that people are sent to segregation or were sent to segregation that year. They sent a total, or they wrote a total of 12,332 disciplinary reports, which ended up sending people to segregation. I'm looking at the one-page chart. and 60% of those were for those 300 and 400 level offenses. Only 4 of them, violation of rules, which is some internal rule, not any of the major things you just talked about, disobeying a direct order, unauthorized movement, and insolence. Low-level offenses, that accounted for 60% of those people. The violent assaults that he's talking about, that's way down at the bottom, number 30. There are only 9 of those, of the 12,332 people that they sent to segregation that year. But they're only talking about disciplinary segregation. This bill goes further. This bill deals with not only the 2,000 people that he mentioned who were in disciplinary segregation, but also deals with everybody in the Department of Corrections who was locked down in cells looking like the one on the chart here, and this is Menard Correctional Center. It's a 4.5 by 9.5 foot cell in which 2 people are held 22 to 24 hours a day currently, even in general population. So these are people who have done nothing wrong. They're there only because the department, it's convenient for their administrative reasons not to let them out. So most of the people who are locked up 22 to 24 hours a day are in there not for disciplinary reasons, but just because they're in maximum security prisons and there's nothing to do.
So you're referring to, the chart that you're working from is 2008 numbers, correct?
It does not have a date on it. The study was put up.
So what I'm looking at is this.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. Yes, 2008 numbers. I'm sorry.
So I'd like to ask the Director of Operations if that meshes with what you're experiencing now, because you've said it's down from that. How do your policy changes make those? Alan, you don't need to step away. I just want to get that comparison. I know this is an awkward committee room. Sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry, what was the question again exactly?
So Mr. Mills shared with us, and it's perhaps not fair that you don't have this in front of you, but
I'm familiar with I probably was even seeing this, so how we got to where we are today and with the reduced numbers, which if we broke this down, if we all had access to the by charge number of infractions that resulted in segregation, it would be dramatically decreased, improved, however you want to look at it. That's even before any of these proposed changes to the departmental rule. There is a high level, as I mentioned before, there's a due process. You go, you get a ticket. It's not guilty as charged and stamped. You go before an adjustment committee that will hear the offender's side, they will read the ticket, they will weigh the evidence. Witnesses have the opportunity to be presented. And then the adjustment committee makes a recommendation to the warden, and the warden has the final determination as to what the discipline is. Now, that same discretion, anytime you have a wide range of discretion, can lead to high level of use of a type of discipline such as segregation. And that's recognized. That's why we're working so hard on this.
This says there were north of 12,000 prisoners released from segregation in 2008. You're saying now the number is about 1,900?
I'm saying now that there are only 1,900 in segregation right now.
This is a rolling number.
So that 12,000 is not individuals, that's 12,000 in and out.
Yeah, I think
Right, so it's not in a static time. That's the number of people went in over an entire year.
So it could be the same person multiple times?
It could be.
Got it. Representative Standack?
Is there anything, and maybe this is to Mr. Mills, because when I saw your chart and I was looking at what you were suggesting, not suggesting, stating that there were violations of rules versus real violent assaults. Is the ratio the same now? Are there any numbers that can help us show if this breakdown is a snapshot in time currently?
Not that the Illinois Department of Corrections shared with us when we filed an FOA asking for those numbers. They said they did not exist. This was the most recent numbers they said they had.
And do you mind addressing that? Because obviously you're anecdotally telling us there have been dramatic changes. Is there any snapshot or estimate you can give us that correlates to this?
It may not have existed. I don't know how they answered the FOIA, but it could have been probably over, they could generate the numbers and make sure it's accurate and get it to whoever the requester is, yes.
So let me just ask the question. So looking at the sheet that Mr. Mills gave us, is it fair to say that generally your experience is it's violation of rules disobeying a direct order, unauthorized movement, etc., versus arson or violent assaults, whether on a guard or another inmate?
By volume, yes,
Okay.
yes. Now, and they come with smaller,
They correlate to
terms of
instances.
segregation,
Well, sure.
shorter terms, and they just happen more often because it's human nature to say, I'm not going over there, or I'm refusing to do that.
Versus a violent act.
Before, yeah, thankfully,
Right.
that's the case. However, if you recall, I mentioned 300 and 400 series charges.
Correct.
They will carry no segregation when this JCAR proposal is done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Representative Davis.
I would like to know, good afternoon or good morning, I'd like to know how many hours does a person have to wait before a person is allowed to come and visit an inmate? You know, I've heard some people have waited for hours to visit and then being told they won't even get to see them.
I can only, if there are anyone turned away, it would be because there was such a long line possibly. A bus came down and then they arrived late in the day and the visiting hours closed before they were allowed to visit. But it is a matter of routine that we make exceptions and keep the visiting room open. So I'm originally from Menard. I came up through Menard, and I remember big Saturdays where Smitty's bus service would come, and there would be several visitors, but they'd be there by 8 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and everybody, they may have to wait in line to have room in the visiting room to have their visit. But I can say that I've not heard of anyone being turned away because they had to wait in line too long and then we closed shop.
Well, I have received complaints against that the person had driven up from Chicago, Illinois, and waited for hours to visit and then being told that there's no real reason,
Sure.
except you have a reason that we don't know about.
There could be that. I mean, we do post the visiting hours on the website, and they're fairly well known. It's some places they go to 5 or 6 o'clock at night, some are 4:30. We do try to make it public information so no one makes a trip late in the afternoon, assuming that they're going to be able to come in on a visit at 7 o'clock at night.
No, you're trying to say they come late, that's not true.
Okay, well, I didn't know what
They
you
come,
said.
no, they come as soon as they're allowed inside. They come hours, early, waiting to get in there to see someone. So I really would appreciate not having those complaints.
I
would
agree.
appreciate not having those complaints.
Sure, I agree with that.
You
Representative?
have more to add, Mr. Miller?
I do, and
Okay.
let me just start where Representative left off. I was in Stateville yesterday, and I waited as a legal visit, even though at Stateville they let lawyers go to the front of the line. I waited an hour for my client to have a visit. So those people who were in the back of the line who didn't get the cut at the very front of the line, I guarantee you they waited way more than an hour. And that was in Stateville, which ends visits, by the way, at 2:30 in the afternoon, not 4 or 5, but at 2:30 in the afternoon. Illinois is not the only state that's dealing with this issue of solitary confinement. I circulated by email the gray box, a video, and in that video, the state of Colorado makes the best defense that there was of solitary confinement. But since that video came out, the new director of the Department of Corrections on his first day in office spent a weekend in solitary and came out and said, we're not doing this to people. This is inhumane. And Colorado doesn't lock people up 24 hours a day anymore. But I want to go back to general population.
Can you tell me what they do? What they've replaced segregation?
They let them out. They don't replace, we're not talking about replacing segregation.
Okay.
We're
No,
we're
what
talking
Colorado
about,
changed to is what I'm
they
asking.
let people out of their cells. We're not saying in this bill that it ends disciplinary segregation.
Got it.
We're not saying that it ends administrative detention. We're saying let people out of their cells so they're not in these tiny little boxes 24 hours a day. In general population, I met with Gerard Schultz yesterday at Stateville. He's in general population now at Stateville. And he gave me his schedule. He gets out of his cell for 2 meals a day, but only 15 minutes each. So it's a total of half an hour a day out of his cell. On a typical day, that's all he gets out of his cell. So there's 2 15-minute meals. Twice a week, he gets a shower. That's about 15 minutes each of those showers. That's another half hour. 2 times a week, He goes to yard, as Mr. Atkinson said. It's supposed to be 2.5 hours, but it ends up usually being about 2 hours because they're understaffed and enough guards to stay there the whole time. That's it. So he's out of his cell approximately 7 hours out of the week, spread over all 7 days. Most days he's in there 24 hours a day, other than the 2 meals. So he's spending 23 hours a day in segregation, which this bill defines as solitary and says even though he's done nothing wrong, he's still locked up 23 hours a day. And what this bill says is you can still punish people, you can still put people in segregation, you can still isolate them from the general population, but for 4 hours a day you have to let them out of their cell. What can they do during that 4 hours? They can certainly go on a visit if they have a visit. Maybe they just sit in the day room and watch a TV. Maybe they mingle outside. Maybe they go to yard. Maybe they go to mental health care, like he said. Maybe that's whatever it is. They can do whatever they want with them. They just can't lock them in these tiny little cells 24 hours a day with nothing to do. Because as you can see from this, 2 people can stand in this cell, but they can't actually both move at the same time in this cell. The fronts of these cells, which is the second picture that's up there, the fronts of those cells are solid doors. So there's no light and no air in these cells either. You know, there's no window in these cells. And there's a solid steel door. These are not the traditional bars with a window in the back that you might see on TV. That's not what we have in Illinois. We have closed, airless boxes which people spend 24 hours a day in. Let me tell you about the violent assaults though. Again, I met with Patrice Daniels yesterday at State Building. He received one of those violent assaults several years ago. It may even have been 2008. His violent assault was he's a seriously mentally ill person. And he was in one of these closed front cells. It was not quite the same. It had little pinholes in the solid steel door. And he began to hear voices, and in order to deal with those voices, he started rhythmically pounding his head against the wall. He was not medicated at the time. He was not getting therapy. A guard came to him and said, "Stop pounding your head against the wall." He continued to pound his head against the wall because he's seriously mentally ill. His first disciplinary report was for failure to follow a direct order. Then he continued to pound his head against the wall and he started bleeding. And some blood splattered out through the little holes to the guard who was outside in front of him. And he got charged with a violent assault. And he got a year in segregation for that. The department referred him out to the Livingston County State's Attorney to be prosecuted for assaulting that officer, but the State's Attorney thankfully declined. But nonetheless, he spent a year in segregation because he was mentally ill and pounding his head against the wall. He wasn't throwing things on people, he wasn't trying to stab somebody, he was pounding his head against the wall and his own blood came out. So even some of those violent assaults aren't really violent assaults. Violation of rules.
Mr. Mills, I know that we've got others that want to
I do.
testify, so
I got 2 examples, all right,
Okay.
very quickly. Crystal Stoneburner at Logan Correctional Center. She was caught with a piece of candy in her pocket. She got 30 days of segregation for that. Nicole Notchke, who was trying to get here today but could not make it, who's now out. Written testimony from her is included in the record. She still has nightmares. She had a seizure at Logan. The guard didn't believe she was having a seizure, so he grabbed her and threw her up against the wall. As she was having a seizure, saliva came out of her mouth and went on the guard. She was charged with an assault, despite having a long history of seizures, which the guards didn't believe, because at Logan they have this theory by the guards that if you're not defecating on yourself or vomiting, then you're not having a real seizure or faking, which has no medical basis whatsoever. But she got a year in segregation for an assault because she had a seizure. That's the violent assaults we're talking about. There's no question there are some people who stab people, and they need to be punished, no question about it. But that doesn't mean that they have to be locked in and tortured for 24 hours a day. Thank you.
do you want me to ask your question? Okay, all right. Do you want some of your witnesses to present?
I do.
Do you have a response?
I do, if you don't
Okay.
mind, just indulge me for one anecdote. To counter a little bit what's being said, I've worked 30 years in this department. I've worked in Menard where there were a lot of assaults. There are people in this room that were there probably when that went on. And I was on the receiving end myself with, an arbitrary, gang-motivated assault. It wasn't because anybody was SMI, it was because they deliberately,
Everybody was
without, I'm sorry, seriously mentally ill. It's burned into my brain. But I really want to point out a recent incident that happened in Lawrence. An officer was assaulted, seriously assaulted, laid out. Basically, he was standing on the walk, watching the line coming out of the dining room. 2 guys, 2 offenders, young guys, which also kind of speaks to the younger generation, they don't think very much about their actions and the consequences. They knew that if they assaulted this guy, they would be transferred somewhere. So without regard for his safety, without regard for anyone's safety, they both brutally attacked this officer and laid him out, and he's still off today. It could have easily killed him. And I don't want to diminish, I don't want it to be unrecognized, the environment that not only offenders are in, but the staff are in, trying to raise their families every day in a facility.
I do want to get to the witnesses. If you could perhaps indicate if the policy changes that you have implemented would have resulted in different outcomes in the cases that Mr. Mills referenced?
Oh, absolutely. That's part of we've recognized that for some time now, and that's what we're doing. And these kind of instances, I'm absolutely certain if there was a piece of candy situation, someone got 30 days of segregation, that would not have happened in this administration. It would not have happened.
All right, how about we get to some of our witnesses? Alan, do you have an order that you want to go?
Yeah,
So state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Brian Nelson. I work at Uptown People's Law Center. I served 28 years in Illinois Department of Corrections. What nobody's talking about is those of us that did not violate any rules. And I was placed in solitary confinement for 12 years straight under administrative detention. I had no hearing. I had no due process rights. I got no report of why I was there. I was not allowed to have property for the first 30 days. My job at the law center is I'm the prison rights coordinator. I get 300 letters roughly per week from prisoners in Illinois. We've got women being transferred from Logan Correctional Center to Decatur because they made an accusation about rape. The officers kept that Logan and investigated, but the woman is transferred and put in segregation solitary confinement. There's also the thing with the visits.
So those are current cases you're talking
Current
about?
cases, yes. This is going on right now today.
I'm not questioning you, I'm just getting it on the record that there's a distinction.
Yes. Currently, right now, if an inmate gets a disciplinary report, they take the visits. They give them no contact visits and limit the time to 1 hour. If you drive from Chicago to Menard Correctional Center, you will get 1 hour visit behind steel glass. When the visit arrives, it takes roughly 20 minutes for the correctional officer to search him, chain him up, and bring him up to the visiting room. So all of that takes away from the visiting time. In TAMS, if our visit was late, our visit was canceled. You don't get telephone privileges in solitary confinement. We got no TV privileges in solitary confinement. And they could change the name from...
Go ahead.
You know, I'm hearing of many of these harmful effects that happen to people, and it's usually against federal law. It's against the federal law. So we might, and ask the chairperson, maybe we need to look at the federal government to investigate this location, to do a thorough investigation by the federal government of what happens in this place. Because many things that are being done are violation acts. They're violation behavior.
And one of them would be called Ross versus Gossett, where tactical officers came to the Department of Corrections in Southern Illinois and did Abu Ghraib tactics. The inmates in Menard are stripped naked, putting pants, shirt, shoes, shackled, hand and foot, marched to the chapel, and forced to stand 4 to 8 hours with their forehead against the wall, handcuffed behind the back. Several of these men have raised an allegation of being physically raped with a baton. And this is all on the record. Department of Corrections calls this policy nut to butt.
So I think the committee can start with a resolution requesting the federal government to do a thorough investigation of events at Illinois Department of Corrections. It's been going on for too many years. I've been for a long time. Too many years that these things have been occurring. And it's just so unfair. The judge has already assigned how many days, how many years you get. And it doesn't go with criminal, to harming a person who's already there. They're already being taken away from their private behavior at home. So then to come in and now we're going to give you some more, what do we call them? Make sure that other things that are harmful to the person who sit there, and many of these things are they're violations. So I would suggest that, Mr. Chairman.
And you know what you're saying? I got out 5 years ago. I'm not out. I got to see a psychiatrist every week because I was in a box that small by myself for 23 years. Not because I stabbed an officer. I mean, that's asking me no. I didn't stab nobody. I mean, and 23 years like that, when I was 14 years old until I'm 46. And I'm out here now. What do we want? It would cost $30,000 a year if I get on SSI. Then I get free medical in the state. I'd be a burden to the state. I had no mental problems when I went to prison. By the time I got out of TAMS, I was on 5 different types of psychotropic medication. I see a forensic psychiatrist every week. I see a psychologist every week. And I'm terrified out here. And what you're saying is, my time might have been up. It is not getting any better for me at all.
So you go through, before a psychiatrist every week? Was that to make sure he was getting paid well?
This was not getting paid at all. She's trying to help me find me.
Outside.
You know? Outside. No, this is since I've been home. You know?
Okay, this is since
And-
been out.
I'm older outside,
Yeah,
okay.
and sadly, my
Coping
parole,
mechanism since getting out.
I see.
my parole officer took me, I had to have a reintegration evaluation when I was released from prison. If I didn't pass this, they were going to civilly commit me for the rest of my life because they were afraid how I was going to act after being in that box for 23 years. And that's all my parole papers. I mean, you locked me up like this, and now you're afraid that I'm going to lose my brain and you're going to lock me up forever. You know, and my mom couldn't believe this. My parole officer took me to 5 doctors. None of them knew what to do. None of them. And I'm luckily, one doctor finally says, you need to see this, 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 this. And it's 6 years now. And I'm still this, and I'm still not out that box. You know, and I'm the one in the gray box. You know, there's kids, 17 years old, being stuck in these boxes forever. What I learned recently is, what did my mother go through watching me do this? My mother watched me go down from 170 pounds to 110. I died on a table with TAMS because I gave up. There was no vitals, no nothing, and they jacked me full of needles and brought me back. And you can't live like that and come out here and I'm a person. Animals in the zoo don't even get treated that bad, you know. And I got no due process rights. I was never told why I was there, and I went from there out here, just like that, you know. And there needs to be changes. You know, there needs to be some programs.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you wanna, is there,
Thank you.
I know this was very hard for you. Thank you.
Ms. Schultz.
Ms. Schultz?
My name's Leanne Schultz. This is my husband. He's a human being. And he was interstate transfer. And he was put in administrative detention for no reason because he's interstate transfer. And he was put in TAMS. He was never violent here. Never. He hasn't had any tickets, anything, but he was put in TAMS and has spent 8 years in administrative detention solitary.
Where is he now that TAMS is closed?
He just got transferred from Pontiac to Stateville. He just got out of solitary, which was supposed to be a wonderful, joyous thing because we fought 8 years for it, and it's a nightmare. Because, well, let me say this too. I care about what happens to the officers and the officers' families, but what nobody's saying here is, if you put these people in boxes and treat them like animals, what do you think is going to happen to them? They are going to go get aggressive, they're going to get mentally ill, and they're going to attack people. That is what's going to happen. I've seen my husband mentally deteriorate. I have to buy him shoes every other month because he paces so much. When he got out of TAMS, he was green. He's Mexican. He was green from the lack of sunlight. He was skin and bones. He had black circles under his eyes. 2 months in Pontiac, he gained 65 pounds, which is supposed to also be a great thing, but he's still in solitary. I decided to keep his mind busy and have him journal and do art. I now have 40 20-gallon tubs of his journaling that says the same thing every day, unless I visited or he had something different to eat. But it's the same thing. 4 20-gallon tubs every day. And you can't expect these men to not be mentally ill, not act out on these officers, not get out and do bad things again when they're being treated like animals. You just can't. We went to visit, sorry.
No, you're doing great.
We went to visit him, my daughter and I, on Monday. It was her first time seeing him in general population. And I can tell you, I was afraid, because I've always done solitary visits. I was afraid to go to general population visits, because I didn't want to have it taken away from me. Because they keep threatening to send him back to top solitary. They put him there for no reason, so they can send him back again. So I finally went, and my daughter went, and she got to see her dad for the first time without glass. And what really struck us both was, it'd been so long that there wasn't glass between us, I didn't even know his voice. I only knew his voice through the phone. And hearing his voice, face to face, it was a different voice. It wasn't my husband's voice. And we sat there, and we were talking about tattoos and stuff, because my daughter's 21, that's what they do. And he reached out and told her, no tattoos from here up, and he touched her. And she freaked out. No, Dad, no, they're gonna send you to solitary. And she's like, oh, scared. We couldn't even enjoy the visit because we're scared all the time he's gonna get sent back, because you don't need a real reason to get sent there.
Thank you very much.
You know, that is major, what she just said. You don't need a real reason to get sent there. That's why we're here today. Please, Chair.
Is there another witness?
Geraldine.
Make sure you state your name for the record, please.
I'm Geraldine Smith. Unfortunately, I don't have the same stories that they're telling you. My story's a little bit different. I'm the first woman that the state sentenced to death since the reinstatement of the death penalty. But the inhumane part of that was, they didn't even have a death row for women. So they put together this old burned out cell, and that's where they cast me. With no rules, no guidelines. And I suffered for years at the whims of what every officer may have thought. Every judgment that they had. I remember asking an officer for a styrofoam cup so I could drink water out of it. Because the sink, when you turn the water on, you could see the rust coming out of it. And she told me she couldn't do that. She couldn't give me a cup to drink out of. Because it wasn't written in the rules. And there was no rules for a woman on death row in this state. The area that they cast me in this old burned out cell was called my cement coffin. I was called the dead woman walking. I was called the condemned woman, where every plate of food that they served me had condemned on the process. So even if I wasn't cognizant of where I was at the time, they wrote it on my food to say, you're condemned. I served 19 years in prison. I'm out of prison, been out for a little while. But my heart beats for what I could see that was going on inside of those prison walls. I held myself and my mind together because I knew who I was. And I knew that no label could make me anything else. But everybody wasn't as fortunate as that. When they used to bring the coalition of state representatives and senators to the Dwight Correctional Center, they didn't want to see them to meet or to see the woman behind the walls, where no human being was able to touch me or be around me or conversate with me unless I talked through the cement wall through a hole. They would take me out of the institution, hide me in their patrol car in the graveyard that's behind the Dwight Correctional Center. I used to sit over there with the lieutenant and an officer inside of the graveyard. And there was one time that I made a phone call because I knew the state representatives and different women was coming down. And I made a phone call to my attorney, and they had me situated in the visiting room so that when the coalition came through, I got a chance to talk to different ones. I got a chance to know who State Representative Mary Flower and the Honorable Modi Davis and different one was. They saw the condition of me being shackled every day. Yet I was the only woman behind that wall in that cement coffin. Do my heart bleed? Yes, it does. Because I had an 8-month-old baby when they arrested me. That 8-month-old baby is a lawyer now. But guess what? I see about children out here now. Last year I serviced 4,100 children, babies up to 18 years old. This year I serviced 3,600. Everybody that is labeled a convict, prisoner, or whatever, you can't make them one. I'm out here doing what I'm supposed to do, but I suffered inhumanely because I had to wait on the courts to make a decision. And all the time, I was the same woman then that I am now. And I plead with this committee to understand that everybody don't have the same mental status. Everybody can't endure the same thing. And I watch women and talk to women. I go back into the prisons and I see about them. Because all of them wasn't raised the same way. Some of them have been beaten and battered and born, just hurt. And they're not able to stand. So today I stand before this committee and say, there's definitely changes. And I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Does anyone want to? Oh, go ahead.
Mrs. Smith, I think you were quite a well-known, grounded person. People knew, a lot of people knew of you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to talk to you later, because I remember that case. It was a very long time, and you did have a lot of strength, and it received a lot of press about it. Well, thank all of you for coming. Thank you.
My name is Gregory Koger. I'm here to demand that the state of Illinois stop torturing people in prison. I spent over 6 years straight in solitary confinement in Pontiac Correctional Center. I was incarcerated when I was 17 years old. I went to trial from solitary confinement in the adult county jail. The United Nations has categorically stated that solitary confinement in excess of 15 days constitutes torture. As we've seen, we have been there many more days than 15 days. And there is no justification from the Illinois Department of Corrections to state that people should be held for longer than 15 days in solitary confinement for security purposes. Torture is a crime. There is no excuse for that for security purposes or any other reason. You know, I still wake up at night and expect to wake up and be in a cell. I grew up in prison. I grew up in cells, you know? And I know people who have mutilated themselves because of losing their rational cognitive faculties in these cells that are being operated by this government, the government of the state of Illinois. And, you know, it has to stop. It has to stop.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses that want to share? Thank you for sharing your stories.
Yeah, one more. Monica.
One more? Okay. If we could try to keep it brief, I know there's some questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Cosby. I was locked up for 20 years. I started in Cook County Jail. I went to Dwight, I went to Lincoln, and then we all landed in Logan. I have not been to solitary confinement since like 2004, 2005. But during the time that I was in Dwight, I was there for quite a while. It's very easy to go to solitary for like the pettiest of reasons. You can go for having a piece of candy or having lip balm, in my case, in my pocket. I'm a mass movement. I had lip balm and I went to solitary confinement. I've been in solitary confinement, and you know, women have maybe some different needs than men. Among them are, we need sanitary napkins, we have menstrual cycles. So I've been in solitary in need of sanitary napkins and could not get them, and was told by one staff to just squeeze my leg shut and hold it in. I had another correctional officer tell me to just sit on the toilet and let it flow. And I've actually had to do that because I couldn't have pads, or more than one pad at a time. Oftentimes in women's prisons, women go to solitary because they say no to the advance of a correctional officer, and it's never that CO that sends you to say, it's the guys that the CO hangs out with at work, or after work, or whatever.
No, you know, that's why Monique Davis, Representative Davis' recommendation to have a federal investigation is very important and should be really considered.
Thank you. What happens to people while they're in solitary, and what happens when, like, some women can go, you'll wind up going to solitary for what should be 15 days or 30 days, but then you're sitting in your bed and where the CO cannot see your face, so that's another ticket, that's another IDR, and so that's another 30 days. So what should be 15 or 30 days to begin with turns into 2 years or 3 years. Or what will happen is you'll go to solitary for 30 days and you'll get out for 2 and then go back and then get out for 3 and then go back, and this can happen 4 years. And how it affects you is that every time you see a CO, every time you hear a certain noise, you're flinching because you think they're coming to get you. And it still happens to you out here because it still happens to me. And I've only been out of prison for 4 months now, but I haven't been in solitary confinement since 2004, 2005, and I still am waiting for someone to come at me and take me back for any little thing.
Thank you.
There's so much to say. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them. Otherwise, I'm done.
Thank you very much. I think the department would like to respond.
Is this in closing or?
No.
No, I thought you wanted to respond.
I'd like to respond at the end.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I would like to know if there is a departmental policy about sanitary products. So.
They will report it any item that is needed. If any, I know that these are stories that represent a rogue officer. Every agency, every group of people has bad weeds. If those are true cases, they would never be tolerated. Policies on making sure that there's adequate toiletries. If someone's been, I can't speak to specifics, but I can tell you there are policies that cover that.
I understand.
So while you're out there, I have a few questions that I would like to ask. It could be yes or no, or you could answer it however you want. So the question is, an inmate or detainee shall not be placed in isolated confinement if there is no reasonable cause to believe that the person would create a substantial risk of immediate serious harm to himself, herself, or others, and a least restrictive intervention would be enough to protect everyone.
That's taken directly from the bill, correctly? Correct?
It is. Would you agree with that portion of the bill?
In premise, yes. There's already a departmental rule that allows for progressive discipline and only acting with minimal need or minimal reaction as to the circumstance.
All right.
I want to go ahead and let Mr. Lane respond, and then I'd like to get clarity. I'm sorry, somebody's pointing at somebody. Do you? Okay. State your name for the record, and please make sure that everyone that has testified actually submits a witness slip, if you could, please, Mr. Nelson.
Hello, I'm Raina Wallace, WALLACE. I'm a licensed dental assistant and an activist. I recently just got out of jail December 3rd. I was taken in because of police brutality, ethnicity, and the capitalized system, as well as my skin color. I'm on 71st and Jeffrey, and I was passing out literature and exercising my First Amendment, which is freedom of speech. And I got chased from 71st and Jeffrey all the way to 71st and Constance. We had a block on this side, Taze on this side, and if I kept running, I would have got hit with one of them. I got taken in. I was in there for 2 months. I was in there. I was in solitary confinement.
You were in IDOC or Cook County?
I was in Cook County,
Okay.
Cook County jail. I was in there the whole time. The whole time I was in there for 2 months, I was in there in solitary confinement. Since I've been out, I've lost my job and my apartment. And since I've been out, it's been hard for me to be able just to live in the society that I am. I feel like there's some changes that need to be, some laws that need to be, changed within just Cook County. I was in a condemned building which is infested with black mold that can kill the inmates and the COs. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Yeah, there was big bugs. There were 3 people to a cell when I was in there. We were not able to come out on our usual times that we were supposed to come out. I just want something to be changed within the system. There are people that are, losing, their lives, and we can't come back. They're making it harder for us to, just get back on our feet. I don't have a place to stay right now. I lost my job. This needs to change. Something needs to happen.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, more questions for the department. So what about a comprehensive medical and mental health examination backwards? Do you think people should be placed in these solitary confinements knowing that they have a condition? What happens if a person is placed in and the reason why they acted out, maybe it was a health condition, and you put someone in a condition like solitary confinement have a health condition as well? Couldn't that put that person at risk and the state at risk for?
So that's part of the due process. They aren't just placed in segregation immediately. If there is a serious enough offense, they could be placed in temporary.
So you're saying that there could never be an instance where a person is immediately placed in segregation?
Yes. There are cases where that could happen, yes.
Do you think it's good and safe for state and the individual? Couldn't they
Well, that's
put
the
the
purpose
state at
of
risk?
that's the purpose of placing them in temporary confinement. If they commit a serious enough offense, that the actual language in the DR, departmental rules, speak of the preservation of the safety and security of the facility. They're in temporary confinement pending the due process or the hearing or the offense.
Is there a difference between confinement and solitary confinement?
It's confinement. Yeah, it's temporary confinement is just that. It's temporary and it's in an area. It could be in.
Is that possible?
It could be in a cell. Yes, it is. Yes. That's a,
And do you think that's right? Is my question. Do you think that's right?
which is right. If there
The
is
immediate person being placed in that type of environment without a real evaluation of their condition.
There are many cells that are 130-year-old prisons, I'm afraid, and I can't speak to the size of those cells. We have to build the large cells and large prisons.
Between a cell, a solitary confinement cell, and a cell that's just a regular cell that's not.
There are some cells at the maximum security facilities that are larger than that, general population cells. There are some that are the same size that are general population.
But the environment is different, right?
It's just it's the reduced is really what the significance difference is there. That's part of the deterrent effect of segregation, is that if you go to segregation for an infraction, you're not going to get to go to a big yard. You'll get to go to a small yard. Or you won't get to have as much personal property in your cell as you normally. It's the privilege restrictions that's meant to be the deterrent effect.
I think what I'm hearing here, and Representative Ford, indulge me for a second. What's very clear is the department would like to do this by rule, and that there's not a lot of faith on the part of the constituency and many of the members that rule is sufficient. I hear what you're saying, that you've made significant changes since this director's been in place, but he hasn't been here long. We don't know how long he's going to be here. So I do think that there is some legitimacy to the desire to enact, to put some of this in statute. What I'd like to get on the record, if I could, Representative Ford, is what your plan is for this bill in terms of, you said you want to continue to work on it, but if we move it out on the floor today.
I want to ask a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me ask you about vulnerable populations. What does that mean? Can you take that into consideration?
We have vulnerable and predator classifications currently for offenders that are by gender, by sexual preference, by lack of sophistication, things like that, and they are clinically classified as a vulnerable. They are placed with other offenders. Same way with if someone has a predatory background.
Is there a population of this vulnerable group that you find to be isolated more than others?
I think so. I don't know exactly what.
You don't pay attention to it then?
It's not true, sir.
Well, is it possible to be able to tell me if gays and transgenders are probably isolated more than others?
No.
It's not possible.
It's not, I mean, if it happens, it's by pure happenstance. There's no, if you're implying that there's some nefarious
I'm not asking a question.
Well, what I'd like to say is that there is no bias in placing anyone in disciplinary segregation based on a classification such as the vulnerable
So you
classifications you mentioned.
stand here today in full support of everyone that's been placed into these confinements, saying that your staff or the staff that places people in these environments are doing the best job that they can do, and that they have not made any misjudgments.
There's always room for misjudgments. There's no one agency, one institution, one person that's perfect, and if there are mistakes made, it should be caught.
And so how do we do that as to work together? That's what we're here for. And I want to say that I know that Representative Sandak is one of the Republicans that truly wants to see change. And he will work with us on these things. And I hope that he hears what people are saying today. And I hope that, I know you hear, and I hope that you're really ready to help us work with the department to do something.
Excuse me, sir. LaShawn, you have my continuing commitment on that. And what I was hoping Vice Chair Cassidy was suggesting, and maybe she is, and she can certainly speak for herself, the process you have started is entirely appropriate and entirely justified. Moving ahead with the bill while there are rules that have yet to be introduced and vetted, and heard the last time is I thought I heard Mr. Lane talk about it, was a critical path for operative investigation, hearings, and process. Jamming with this time, I think, is a mistake. I think it's a mistake.
Let me tell you what I think. So this bill will probably be voted on open. And it's open, and it's probably going to pass out of this committee, and I think there's a lot of work to do. But what is, I'm committed to getting it right, but I'm not committed to waiting to do it right. I want input on it. The community should have input on it. They've invested their time and efforts, and we must continue to work after today because we have until the end of May. I'm not confident in the department's ability to do it right, and not the department's prerogative to do it the way they want. The people here should have a say on how this state runs. And for you to tell us that we have no business butting into the process we're going to administer. They say they don't need us to do it. You can do it yourself. I said, do we need law? You say no.
I say, sir, that no one's actually seen what we've done. I mean, we've got a draft.
That's okay. That's why we're
So
here.
did you just say you have a draft of the rule that you're willing to share?
I don't know if that's proper to preempt the J.
Well, what it
I'd love to
means,
get us
what
crowded.
I'm saying, what it means is an amendment could be added to this bill to get it right.
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to get, is sort of what your game plan is. That it's not trying to put you in a...
But I'm not going to do my game plan until they're ready to do compromise.
I'm ready to continue.
Because what they're going to tell me their game plan is to hold off this legislation, but we have until May 31st.
I don't think they can hold off
I mean,
the
are you gonna
legislation.
try to do it in
I
the
think
Senate?
you're gonna
Is
move
that
it.
what you mean, that you're hoping we could amend it in the Senate?
No, we can amend it in the House.
Oh, so you, on an extended deadline?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I was trying to get clarity on.
Again, Michael Lane, Department of Corrections. I'm not sure what happened between last Thursday and today, but I sat in your office. I came to see you after we had our first committee meeting with you and Mr. Mills, and I gave you my word that Decker is very interested in this.
Okay, since that time, have you guys talked about this? And have you decided to set a meeting up with me and other members of the committee?
That was Thursday. Friday morning or Friday afternoon, the posting came out that it had been moved to this committee.
Let's not talk about.
So I'm not sure if that was in good faith that we were going to sit down.
Sean, I mean,
No.
hold on.
Absolutely not.
I don't think this is really fine.
With due respect, I mean, I was there Thursday too, and we had a commitment to work together.
So should I wait till next Thursday?
Okay, there's a lot going on in this bill, and no one's gonna snap their fingers on any
I
piece of
think these
legislation.
people really want us to do something today. If you want us to hold off, who wants today?
Torture has to stop.
And I got a grievance that the Department of Corrections said it's their prerogative to use me in psychological
We're
experiments.
going sideways because I say I want to work on it now?
No, let's work on it now, but you're pushing a bill that no one, I mean, Sean, Thursday we had a commitment to work together, and now you're
What's
pushing
a
a
good
bill.
time frame to wait before the department? Yeah, let me just find out what's a good time frame from Representative Sanders. Tell me so I can be reasonable here. But right now, what I'm hearing from certain people is that I'm being unreasonable.
No one used that word. No one used that word, and
Tell me what am I doing wrong?
you're not doing anything wrong. I'm asking you to go back to Thursday. Let's set a path, a calendar, so we can have an actual
I
thoughtful,
think we actually
engaged
did that
process.
because what we established is that this is likely going to be a subject of a deadline extension request.
Yes.
So that
I've already-
procedurally, we're going to try to amend it in the House before we try to pass it in the House.
That's what I mean.
That's
I
your
will
hope.
work with the
Make this better. We are both, I believe, moving in the right direction. I'd be happy to bring the director down. I'd be happy to schedule meetings. We can do that today. I'm just saying that between Thursday afternoon and today, something appears to have changed. I want to work with you,
Okay.
and the department would like to work
Let
with
me
you.
just go on the record again and say, from Thursday to now, seems unreasonable to you and all that you have to do. But let's talk about what happened from, when was that meeting? It was over in the summer when the director first got, I'm very honored that he met with me.
Yes,
So
sir.
how long ago did the director come on board?
He's been with the department for 8 months.
8 months.
I attended the meeting that we had.
Okay, so 8 months ago,
Yes, sir.
has there been any progress between my outreach to him?
I believe when the director met with you, he'd been with the department for possibly 2 weeks. I think the first time I met the director was in the basement of the Stratton building that day before we met with you.
So is it fair to say
So-
that I've been waiting on some type of,
I think it's fair to say the director has been working his behind off at putting
With
these
or without
policies
me?
in place.
What-
I believe the director had told you and had given the commitment to you that that he was working on this, he asked for time to work on this, and I believe the director, I sat there and the director had said that when he had come up with a plan, which I think you've heard today, we are very close to coming up with, that he would sit down with you and would like you to see the plan. I think he was very open with
Can
you
we
that
sit
day.
down this week with the director?
I'm not.
Can you try to do that, please?
I will try to do that.
so my point is from 8 months to today, I've been patient. And so from Thursday to today, you must understand my emotion about this. And Representative Monique Davis.
I do, but I know we're also talking about policies that have been in place since the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So eight months for a new director in a new department, I believe 8 months. And the amount of work that he has completed in that 8 months, I believe, is very good. And I believe that he continues to do that. So yes, I understand your frustration for the amount of time, but I do not believe that 8 months for policies that we've been talking about for the last 30 or 40 years is a lot of time.
Representative Davis?
Well, the process requires let your laws get completed. You can always talk, even though a bill is passed, there's still time for talk. So to stop the process is not fair. It's not fair to those listening, it's not fair to any of us. The fair thing is to pass the bill out of here and continue to talk.
And I've given you our commitment that there's no doubt in my mind that the bill will pass out of here today. And I've given you my commitment and my department's commitment that we will sit down and continue to work on this.